So when we talk about harmonizing the heart and the brain, three very simple steps. The first step is to shift the awareness from the mind into the heart. And the indigenous people typically will do this by simply touching their heart center in a way that is comfortable for them, because the awareness immediately goes to the place where you feel that touch. It's the first step. And then the second step is they will breathe a little bit slower, slow the typical breathing. And when we slow our breathing, we're sending a very powerful signal to our body that we are safe. And when we feel safe, there's a little switch, an emotional switch that begins to send a different chemistry into the body from the brain, a life-affirming chemistry of healing and rejuvenation, rather than the stress chemistry of fight or flight. Second step. The third step is consciously and intentionally feeling a positive, uplifting emotion, because we choose to feel it. Maybe the world's not giving us anything to respond to, but we choose to feel. And typically one or some combination of four emotions fill that function: gratitude, appreciation, care, or compassion. One of those four typically will work for pretty much everyone. When we harmonize the heart and the brain, we are moving ourselves out of the polarity thinking of the rightness or the wrongness of what has happened to us in the past. That is only in the brain. And we're bringing those heart neurons into the equation. A part of my blood heritage is Southeastern Cherokee from Oklahoma in the US. And there is a word for this heart focus that doesn't even exist in the English language, but the Cherokee have used this. It's called Shante Ishta. Shante Ishta means the single eye of the heart. It's the eye that does not see the polarity of the rightness or the wrongness or the goodness or the badness. It's the eye that will discern safety and fear, but it will never judge another being, and it will never judge us. It will never judge me. So when I can look at my past, my history, and my hurts from within this place of heart-brain harmony, then the wrongness of what was done to me, or my shortcomings of shame, or the hurt that I felt, those all take a back seat. And what I begin to see and feel is that the experience, it's almost beyond words, but the experience does not have the emotional charge that holds me locked into the negative space, the body chemistry or the emotional space. And it frees me, as I've said before, it frees me to move forward in a healthy way from having had the experience that I can't change. So this is where the electrical fields and the magnetic fields all come into play. What we now know is that the heart has the strongest it is the strongest bioelectrical generator in the body, and it's the strongest biomagnetic generator in the body. When I was in school, I was taught that the brain is electrical and magnetic, and it is, but it pales in comparison to the heart. The heart is about 5,000 times stronger than the brain magnetically, and about 100 times stronger than the brain electrically. Now think about what this means. We live in an electrical and a magnetic world, electromagnetic fields all around us, and we are constantly interacting with these fields. We're wired to do that. Our neurons are wired to do that. So if we're going to interact with our electromagnetic world through an organ that is designed to do just this, it makes perfect sense it would be the heart, because the heart is literally wired to interact with the world around us, not the brain. This is why sometimes it's difficult to think through the solution to the problem, whereas feeling through the solution to the problem is a very successful outcome. And this is one of the deep truths of our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions that is only now being understood by modern science, because the equipment is validating these relationships.
At the end of the book, I describe two codes that are called power codes. We find these, we find them in a number of indigenous traditions. They are most pronounced in the Judeo-Christian tradition because they were preserved in the original Hebrew language. So I'll make a distinction. This isn't about Jewish faith. It is about the Hebrew language and the codes that were left for us. The Hebrew language is one of the most mysterious. It is called a core or a root language. There were originally 6 root languages: Sanskrit, cuneiform, cuneiform, Hebrew, and Arabic, and 2 others that are no longer used. These were the original languages. And it is a very stable language. We find the texts that are over 2,500 years old, and we look at those today, and they're almost identical, very stable. So in these traditions, what we're told is that the phrase "I am" and the Hebrew way of saying that is actually a code that communicates vibrationally, as well as the meaning that is, and I will, and I am. So, for example, when people say, we typically think when we say "I will," it means I will take out the trash tomorrow morning. It means I'm going to do something later. But in these spiritual traditions, the word "I will," it's not something I'm going to do later. It is something that I'm saying, I will that this be true. In other words, I claim that this be true. And it's a very different use of the word. So when we understand that, and "I am" is the same, we go back and we look in these original traditions without the judgment that so many people have put around these. These were powerful codes that were left to our human family by those who understood them in a time past. And if we can cut through all of the baggage and all of the judgment and go to the wisdom of those who have come before us, that wisdom can serve us in our lives. So the "I am" code, there's been a lot written about the codes, some more accurate than others. It is a declaration of what is true in the present moment, and how that is applied. And when we embrace that declaration in the presence of heart-brain harmony, this is the key. When we harmonize the heart and the brain, it's like saying to the biology, all systems go, all systems are ready, all systems are primed. Because this literally is what happens. When we harmonize the heart and the brain, it harmonizes all of the systems in the body, the metabolic systems, all of the cells come into harmony. There's a frequency, 0.1 hertz, a very low frequency that is created. It's a healing frequency. When we create that, you can think of that as the operating system in the human body, just like the operating system on the computer. The operating system, once it's there, it needs a program to function, but the program works best under the operating system. "I am" is a program. "I will" is a program. So when we optimize our operating system, harmonize the heart and the brain, and then we claim our healing, we claim our joy, we claim our life with the "I am" and the codes that are associated with "I am," it is more potent in that heart-brain harmony. When it comes to an affirmation, affirmations can be powerful, and for some people they're not. And a lot of people say, well, you know, if the affirmation is so powerful, how come I'm not experiencing the effect? What scientists tell us is the average human speaks to themselves, consciously or unconsciously. We have thoughts spinning around in our brain, about 60 to 80,000 thoughts per day. Some of those thoughts are the words to the songs, and they are the affirmations. Neuroscientist Andrew Newberg tells us, Newberg is his name, I'm sorry, in his work that a single word has the power to change the genes that create stress or relieve stress in our lives. He's telling us that something within us has the ability to shift to the very core of our expression. So we know that words are powerful. The key to a successful affirmation is that we must communicate with the subconscious part of our mind, number one. Number two, we must communicate in the language that the subconscious recognizes. And this is where, you can say, I had a friend of mine when I was working in the corporations that had affirmations all over his office, all over his computer screen. They were on little Post-it notes in the car we would carpool in.
My perfect mate is manifesting for me now. My perfect mate is manifesting for me now. That was his affirmation. And I said, do you say these things? He goes, oh man, I say them about 1 million times a day. I said, do they work for you? He says, nah. These things don't work. And I said, well, why do you think they don't work? And he said, look at me. He says, I'm an engineer. I'm a slob. He said, I wear the same clothes to work 3 out of 5 days during the week, and the bottom line, by the time he finished describing himself to me, even he didn't believe that he was worthy of his perfect mate manifesting for him now. So he was saying the words, but he was not, there was the underlying emotion, and what he was actually feeding into his system was counter to what those words were saying. So it's not enough to say the words. When we go into our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, those words are what become the prayers. And for many people, and I know you've heard this as well, a lot of people feel that prayer is broken, that the world doesn't work today the way it worked in biblical times, that we have lost our power and that we have no ability to communicate with a greater power, with God, with the forces around us. And it's largely because the secrets, the deep truth of our relationship, the fundamental physics of our relationship to our world have been minced and parceled and in many cases deleted from the texts, leaving us with a sense that we are essentially powerless beings. And if you are powerless, then you are a victim. And if you're a victim, you need a savior. And that savior is coming to us on a silver plate in terms of technology, in terms of political leaders. I will save you if you just do these things. And this is why I say I think one of the most powerful acts and the most radical act we can do is to think for ourselves original thinking based upon the deep truth of our relationship to our bodies and the earth, not based upon the false assumptions of obsolete science that permeate our academic world right now. It's one of the reasons I left academia. It's one of the reasons many of my colleagues who are in this genre, who are very well-respected scientists, have left academia because they were not allowed to share with students and in their writings and their papers what they had found in their research that reflects a very different reality. So for me, it's good news. It's a beautiful message of hope and possibility as a sovereign biological being. For a system that's based on centralized power and control, it's probably the worst news they could imagine, because it means we don't need the centralized power and control. I think ultimately we're all better off by embracing our own power because it frees us from the fear of a changing world. And we all know my world is changing, your world is changing. Nor is it ever. Yep. Faster than we can document it in our classrooms and textbooks. But the change isn't necessarily bad until we compare it to what we've known in the past, and this is where the fear comes in. So the new discoveries helping us to understand we are part of rather than separate from our world. And this is where the affirmations come in. So I was at the CERN superconducting supercollider in Geneva, Switzerland, where the physics experiments that are revealing what happened moments after our universe began. They recreate the beginning of our universe, and then they're able to document what happened then to create the laws of physics that we are experiencing, that we're living under right now. And what they announced in 2012 is that there is in fact a field, an intelligent field of energy. It's a subtle energy that underlies all of creation. Before then, it was a metaphor, or a lot of people felt like it was a New Age concept. We are all one. Everything is connected. Or an indigenous. A lot of indigenous elders talk about this. Here's where they got stuck. And I've gone to scientific conferences where they'll take their hands and they'll say, "Oh yeah, that's no longer controversial. There is a field. There's a field out there that connects all things." And their hands go like this. There's a field out there that connects all things, because subconsciously they're still saying we're separate from that field.
Right.
But here's what the science is showing us, and this was a game changer for me, just a mind blower, that every atom in every molecule and every cell of our bodies in this very instant, so it's not like it's about to happen, it's happening right now. Every atom is constantly emerging and collapsing into that field. And what that says to us is that we are the field. It's not the fields out there. We literally are wrinkles. We are disturbances in this field, this body that is held in place by a conscious awareness as long as I'm breathing on this earth. I am a disturbance. I'm a localized wrinkle in that field. And what that means is that if I want to bring about change in my world, I don't have to force a change out there. I become that change. Mm-hmm. And as I have become that change, the field is now reflecting what it is because I'm part of the field. Mm-hmm. So it's a subtle, but it's a very powerful way, very different way of thinking. You're not imposing change on the world around you. You are becoming the change. So you're becoming the abundance. You're becoming the love, the gratitude, the care, the healing. You're becoming those things, and that is very different. We're conditioned to ask for them, mm-hmm. to plead for them, because we're led to feel powerless in our lives, when in fact there are modalities of ancient prayer that were edited from the religious texts in the 4th century by the church. They took out the information helping us to understand this deep relationship, leaving us powerless. And affirmations are essentially a form of prayer, or prayer is a form of affirmation, however you want to look at it, where we are communicating. And I want to be really clear, it's not about control, it's not about manipulation, it's not about imposing our will, it's about participating in the way that this field unfolds and expresses in our lives. And when you really begin to get that shift, it's subtle and it's powerful. It's not making something happen out there. Mm-hmm. And that means you can't blame what's out there for your experiences. I come from a very dysfunctional, broken family, and I had to make a choice early in life as to whether or not I would, and community, as to whether or not I would allow that to define my experience, to define my existence. Other people around me had the same experience, and they made very different choices. They today continue to blame their environment, their parents, their family, their upbringing for the sad and unfortunate things in their lives, and that's a path. Mm-hmm. It's not right, wrong, good, or bad, but we have a choice to make another path. And when we begin as a scientist, beginning to understand these relationships gave me the reason to think differently. I don't have time to understand myself because I'm trying to put food on my table and feed my family, or I'm trying to do my best in school. And those, I understand all of that. Here's the thing. We have been conditioned to live in a world through a way of thinking that has served us in the past. And we have to say it served us because you and I are here now, so it worked well enough to get us here. That way of thinking worked in the world the way it used to be. The world just changed, and nobody told us it. There was no special on CNN, or the Discovery Channel. Hey, the world changed. I wish there was. So we've never been given the opportunity to even mourn the passing of the world that no longer exists. So we're trying to solve our problems and think about ourselves the way we always have in a world that changed, and it doesn't fit. It no longer fits. So yes, we've got all these little things going on, but what I've found in my own life personally, if I can back up and shift the paradigm, and I'll tell you what I mean by that, but if I can shift the paradigm within which I'm seeing everything, all of a sudden all those little things take on a whole new meaning, and they become a lot less of a problem. They become much easier. The paradigm is this. We have been conditioned, steeped in a story of who we are that is based in separation, competition, and conflict. It began in 1859. And people say to me, Greg, 1859, it was over 100 years ago, 150 years ago. So what? It's a good question. What difference does that make? It's a good question. Here's the answer. The world we live in the society, the economic system, the corporations, the medical model, the way that we're taught to provide for our families, the way that we are taught to have the most intimate relationships under the roof with the people that we share our homes and even our bed with. I mean, let's just get real. We are taught to interact with humans based upon these ideas of competition, conflict, and separation. And even the most spiritually minded people that say, I've transcended that, when they are in a heated discussion and somebody pushes their buttons, they go to that lowest common denominator often of competition. They will lash out with something really hurtful to defend themselves. It's not their fault. It's deeply ingrained in our subconscious. So as, not if, because it's already happening, as we back off and embrace the new paradigm of cooperation and mutual aid, that is huge. It is a hugely different way of thinking. It means we live in a world that likes us, where nature is not out to snuff out every good thing that happens to us. It means we don't have to be constantly vigilant in defending ourselves from the world around us. That is a hugely, vastly different way of thinking. And we have an opportunity now to begin with an entire generation of young people who now are steeped in the glamour of war, conflict, and competition to make that shift. What would it look like to have a world where we have an entire generation of young people that know that nature likes them and that we live in a world of cooperation and mutual aid and connection? We're about to find out. We don't have to wait long to find out. So for me, simply backing up out of the minutia momentarily to look at the big picture and to make that shift. And once we make that shift, when you go back into the minutia, everything looks different to me. And that it's worked in my life.
Number one, we've already talked about. The words have meaning. And when we read those words, that meaning changes the way that we feel. And in the presence of that shift, we are changed chemically. Andrew Newberg tells us we are changed genetically. So the meaning of the words themselves, this is where it gets a little tricky with translations, because in some languages there is no word-to-word translation. And that's why in the book, the second part is the actual vibration of the native language, whether it is Sanskrit, whether it is Hindu, whether it is the Hebrew language, whether it is the Egyptian tones, and I have given those in here as well. So can I just give two examples?
Yeah.
So, for example, in the Hindu text, one of the most powerful Hindu mantras is Om Namah Shivaya. Om Namah Shivaya. There is really no single English or French word that each of those sounds translates into. So we can create, a sentence to give meaning, but the actual word Om does not have an equivalent in the English language. So what this mantra is all about, Om is the seed syllable. It is believed to be the primal vibration that set into motion the universe as we know it today. Nama is about the self. It's about honoring and adoring the power of the self. Shivaya is, and you see behind me, to remind me every day, you see a dancing Shiva. In the Hindu traditions, this represents the three deities, the trilogy: Brahma, the creator; Vishnu, the preserver; Shiva. And there's controversy around Shiva, because if you Google this, you may find that Shiva is called the destroyer. But in the deep understanding of the Hindu traditions, Shiva is the transformer. Sometimes to transform what exists into what is yet to be, what exists must be destroyed. But it is not destruction for the sake of destruction. It is the breakdown of what is not true to give way to something of a deeper truth. So Om Namah Shivaya is a way of honoring that within ourselves, but there are no direct words. So the mantra itself, Om Namah, and when it is sung, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. It's a very, very powerful. I mean, I can feel that right now just from saying that. So that is one aspect of using the original sound. The ideas, one of my, I think, honestly, Lila, one of the most powerful of these is a prayer in the native North American. It is an indigenous tradition that's called Navajo. That is very close. The Navajo land is very close to where I am right now. Beautiful land, high desert, thin air, 3,000 meters above sea level, just beautiful, blue skies. And in the Navajo tradition, the power of beauty is revered as the fifth force in physics. So physics tells us in the sim talks about this a lot. When you he and I are dear friends, brothers. You know, we're doing research together right now, and we talk about this sometimes. The four forces of physics: the electromagnetic force, the gravitational force, the strong and the weak nuclear force. Those are acknowledged. The fifth force, the Navajo say, is the power of beauty. And for them, beauty is more than an aesthetic. It is literally a force. We are changed in the presence of beauty because when we behold beauty, we feel differently in the presence of beauty. That difference changes the chemistry, and we now know the DNA inside of our bodies. So the Navajo have a very long prayer, too long to go into here, to honor beauty. And then they have an abbreviated version that I say to myself almost every day, sometimes multiple days. It is a cornerstone of my life. Beauty has been a cornerstone of my life since I was a kid. So the prayer simply, three very easy lines. The beauty that I live with, the beauty that I live by, the beauty upon which I base my life. The beauty I live with tells us that beauty already exists everywhere. We do not have to create it. The beauty that I live by invites us to seek out the beauty in all things because it's already there. There is something beautiful in everything that we experience. Our job is to find it. Mother Teresa was a master of this, and I talk about that in the book. The beauty upon which I base my life is the invitation to allow the power of beauty to serve us in our lives. And when we begin to approach our difficult relationships, if I'm going to have a difficult phone call with a publisher or with a producer or with a partner in life or with ourselves or with an election or whatever it is that is happening in our lives with a lockdown, it is an invitation to not be defined by the circumstances as they appear, but to find the power and the mastery to define ourselves by the beauty of which exists in all things, and our job is to find that. So I say it to myself in the morning in the shower. I say it on a walk in nature. I hike every day. So those are two examples. One of them is the actual vibration of the word. The second one, beauty, is the significance that we give to our experiences and helping us to find a way to think differently about those experiences. Everything that I could ever imagine exists, from the lightest of the light to the darkest of the dark, to the greatest ecstasy to the deepest hurt. It exists as a potential. And in physics, that potential is thought of as a scalar form of energy. It means it exists as a potential, but it's not a realized form of energy. It's our relationship to this field and all of those moving potentials that gives us the ability to collapse the potentials into the scalar potentials into a vector reality. Okay, so that's the words that describe the physics. We don't have to know that. What it says to us, it is our love or our fear of one of those potentials is what brings it
breathes life into it so that it can become present in our lives. So this is very interesting because a lot of people are afraid. They're afraid to think of bad things because they don't want to make it real. And thinking of it, we are such awesomely created beings. We are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology. We, rather than chips and wires and chemicals, we are neurons, ion potentials across cell walls, blood and crystalline bone. And every cell, I'll just run through this real quick. Every cell, the average human body has between 50 and what you said, 70 trillion cells in the body. Each of those cells, we are taught to think of as like these little soft, gushy, kind of mushy bags of water that have some stuff in them. And that's one way of thinking. But what the science tells us, every one of our cells has about 0.07 volts of electrical potential. And you say, well, that's not very much. And I say, you're right, until you do the math. 50 trillion times 0.07 volts, I'll just do the math. It's about 3.5 trillion volts of electrical potential. And people will listen to this, they'll write that down, 3.5 trillion. What does that mean? If you all know what a 12-volt car battery looks like, or they now use them for our solar panels to store energy from the solar, a 12-volt battery, it is the equivalent, it would take a little over 3 billion 12-volt batteries lined up on a highway somewhere to equal the electrical potential in one human. And it doesn't stop there, because every one of those cells also has the characteristics of a transistor and of a resistor and of a capacitor. And what that means is that we massage the energy and the information that comes through our cells. Every cell stores and retrieves information, just like we do on our computer chip. Every cell in our body is emitting photons of light and receiving photons of light. That is information that we interpret in our system. Every cell in our body, the outside of the cells have receptors that literally are antenna that receive chemical signals, and we're hearing about that because of COVID. But they also receive subtle energy cells and subtle energy information and electrical and magnetic information. And it goes all the way down to the nucleus. The strands of the DNA are antenna. The genes are smaller portions of that antenna. You begin to see that all of the technology that we build in the world around us actually mimics what we already do in the cells of our body, except we do it better than the technology can ever do. And here's the key, is that we self-regulate all of this inner technology through thoughts, feelings, emotions, beliefs, breath, focus, the core of our most ancient and cherished spiritual traditions, and now the techniques that are being honed in the laboratories of the research institutions of the world. And this is what our programs are all about, helping people to change their story. This all changes our story and the way we've been taught to think. So when we begin to self-regulate this potential, it's everything I said, we have the ability, literally on demand, consciously on demand, we can create a stronger immune system. Very well documented in the scientific literature. It doesn't take long to do it. It takes minutes. Literally in minutes, you can start enhancing your SIGA immune response, first-line response in the mouth. We awaken the longevity enzymes that stop the damage in the DNA, that heal the damage that's already occurred, and then begin to regenerate, rejuvenate, and rebuild those the strands of DNA and the telomeres on the ends of the DNA. We have access to deep states of intuition, and in that intuition is where our affirmations come in. You don't have to go into a hypnotic trance from another person. We have the ability to access that subconscious on demand, and so much more. And all of this changes the way we've been led to think about ourselves. And the science, you can't make this stuff up. Beautiful symmetry. The science is only now emerging precisely at the time when the systems that we have come to trust and respect in the past are buckling and collapsing around us. Social systems, economic systems, the way that we choose to live our lives on a daily basis, what we're finding is that localized living is the key. So localized forms of sources of food and energy and finance and resources, localized business. This is the way that we live successfully in a time of extremes. And as we begin to assume and embrace our mastery of our soft inner technology, we are much more comfortable, much less fearful of letting go of the old centralized ways of living. It just makes sense to live locally. And you don't need science to tell you that. Our indigenous traditions have known, this is the beauty, Rob, you don't need the science. It doesn't have to be technical. The science helps us to understand the relationships. And then we can let that go and just implement these relationships in our lives. So when people ask me, do I believe that those who have come before us, our ancestors, the most ancient and cherished of our spiritual traditions, did they leave us a guide or a blueprint of some kind that would help direct us in terms of the changes in our lives? And I'm in awe at the wisdom from our past shared with a people that they could only imagine in their future. They had no way of knowing what the world would look like 2,000 years later. And their words are as powerful and relevant today as they were 2,000 years ago. And I go back to the words from the Nag Hammadi, from the Master, from Jesus. If you bring forth that which is within you, it will save you. That which we're bringing forth is our love. And if we do not bring forth that which is within us, it will destroy us. And I find that to be true as well. If we deny love to ourselves, or we deny the love that we have within us to share it with the world, that is a very destructive power, because not expressing that potential and not receiving that potential is the very opposite of what it is that we're wired to love or to receive in our lives.